At the Republican National Convention, Texas Senator Ted Cruz refused to come out and endorse nominee Donald Trump. Trump, aware of this slight, took to the floor himself and walked around in the audience, briefly disrupting Ted Cruz's speech. As usual, Ted Cruz continues to play games, think only of himself. While he talks unity, his actions are self-centered and they are not in the interests of the Republican Party. This is one of the reasons that many lawmakers do not like Ted Cruz and why he lost the overall nomination. He couldn't even convince most Republican voters to vote for him. Yet he had the nerve to say, the ego to say, the temerity to say that the entire future of the country was basically in his hands, and that if people did not vote for him and support him, he considers himself to be a true conservative, that the future of the United States was in serious jeopardy. Can anybody be more delusional than that? It's hard to imagine. We'll have a special about Ted Cruz's speech and we'll analyze it in detail, exposing many false claims that he made, because as usual, in much of what he says, Ted Cruz just doesn't tell the truth. His nickname is not Lion Ted for no reason. It is in fact wholly justified. The purge in Turkey continues unabated. Turkey's autocratic, semi-dictatorial leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, continues his crackdown on his enemies, both real and imagined. To date, more than 100,000 people, many of whom are innocent, have been swept up by the forces of Erdogan. He has purged thousands of military personnel, thousands of educated teachers, doctors, and scientists in a purge that is worthy of such previous dictators such as Joseph Stalin. The only thing Erdogan has not done yet is kill them. Speaking of which, Erdogan is trying to arm twist the Turkish parliament so that it will reinstate the death penalty. Since many of these people will be charged with treason, it is safe to assume that if the death penalty is put back into law and practice, it will probably be made to be retroactive, and Erdogan may execute some of his so-called enemies. Erdogan is also pressuring the United States to release or deport, actually, a critic of Erdogan who used to be one of his closest allies. Former Secretary of State John Kerry has told Erdogan's government that it will not consider an extradition request until if and when Turkish officials supply absolute evidence that would justify such an expulsion. Currently, Erdogan's opponent lives in Pennsylvania. He says he wants to remain in the United States, and he denies any involvement in the recent coup attempt to oust Erdogan from power. In Turkish politics, the military is considered to be the guardian of secularism. Turkey is officially a secular country. It is not an Islamic country, although Erdogan, ever since the power that he now holds went to his head, has tried every trick in the book to continue to push Turkey so that it is increasingly conservative Islamist. Erdogan is known for being a sexist, for treating women unfairly, for also being extremely thin-skinned and prosecuting journalists who dare to criticize him. Record numbers of them have either been imprisoned or have been fined by Turkish authorities or even expelled since Erdogan has been in power. United States officials have repeatedly warned Erdogan not to engage in excessive behavior and use the coup that was attempted against him as an excuse to go after his political enemies, both real and imagined. President Obama has warned him. Russian President Vladimir Putin has even warned him, as have the European Union and Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. Erdogan, if he has any common sense, would do wise to stay on Merkel's good side, since without Germany's support, Turkey will never join the EU. The United States deficit now stands at $19.4 trillion. Isn't that great, folks? When Democrat Barack Obama first came into power, he was complaining about George Bush making or racking up the deficit to some $16 trillion. Now it's $19.4 trillion. So the debt has increased during the 2 terms of Obama's presidency, a total of $3.4 trillion. Now, if this is not the definition of irresponsible fiscal management, nothing is. Naturally, Obama supporters will say it's not his fault, it's the fault of those vile Republicans. If only reality were this simple. The bottom line is that the President of the United States, regardless of who it is ultimately the person responsible for what happens at the government level. The greatest presidents in American history have been able to rise above partisan politics, even when they've been rampant, and have been able to still get their agendas through. Such examples would include Republican Abraham Lincoln. Now imagine being President of the United States when Lincoln ruled, when there was a civil war taking place and the very battle for the heart and soul of the country was at stake. Either the North would win the war or the South. Lincoln still managed to triumph. In fact, one of the tactics that he used was to make a point to include his enemies and opponents in his administration. He was able to succeed by doing this. Divide and rule politics was not what he was after, and he didn't play that game. Now you have the current situation, which has actually been entrenched ever since Obama became president in 2008, where the Republicans just oppose everything he does. They are nicknamed the Party of No. But this tactic it's been tried before. It's been used before ever since the Republican Party came into existence. It's not a new tactic. And while the level or degree to which obstructionism is practiced has varied from administration to administration, to blame the other side for one's failure is wrong. It's kind of like the Super Bowl or a football game. If 2 teams play and one beats the other, whose fault is it that the team that lost? It is that team's fault. They lost. The other side beat them. Do they sit there and say, well, it's not our fault we lost? No. They have to accept it for what it is, that they were defeated, whether it's justified or not. Unless there was some bad ruling by officials or something that could not be controlled, a loss is a loss, a defeat is a defeat, a victory is a victory. So now the U.S. is $19.4 trillion in debt. Nobody seems to care, though. And it's arguably insane. We, as in Americans and the United States, are the world superpower. But yet on paper, the United States is broke. It's $19.4 trillion in debt. That is a sum of money that is greater than all of the debt of every nation on this planet, more than 200 countries. If you combine all of the debt that they have, it doesn't even come near to the debt that the United States by itself currently has. So what is the solution to this? Who caused $19.4 trillion in debt? The short answer is 2 political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And guess what, folks? Voters get to go to the polls in November and choose more Democrats and more Republicans and put them back into power and let them just keep increasing the debt. If this isn't the definition of insanity, I don't know what is. As Albert Einstein said, yes, the Albert Einstein, the father of the theory of relativity, he said one definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over and getting the same results and expecting a different outcome. When you have 2 political parties that are running the country into the ground, where most Americans now live either at or below the poverty line, it's arguably insane to keep these 2 parties in power, to keep voting them back into office when they're not going to solve the problem. In fact, they're the ones that caused the problem. America is now ripe for a third-party alternative as long as it's viable. Most Americans, for the first time in modern history, are open to a third-party alternative. And one day, that person or that phenomenon will grip the nation, and we'll see a president of the United States who is not a Democrat, nor is that person a Republican. Instead, they're an individual who was put into office because Americans are tired of the tired status quo. They want something new, they want something different, and most importantly, they want something that works.